Good morning. Good to see you all. Feels like I haven't talked in ages. I mean, from this place. Talk all the time. I want to speak about community today. And I know it's hard. I don't even quite know how to give it a form of what I feel is on my mind. But I'll start. Maybe it takes more than one talk or something. Sorry, my foot is cramping. Now, maybe let's start with loneliness. You may have heard in the news there is something happening that is being called a loneliness epidemic. There's a Harvard study that was done in 2020 where 36% of Americans, this is the beginning of the pandemic, so we have to understand it in that context, but 36% of Americans reported to be frequently or almost always feeling lonely. And really shockingly, in that same study, 60% of young adults, 61% of young adults aged 18, between 18 and 25, reported this serious loneliness and social isolation. And 51% of mothers with young children. Now, one would think like, oh, maybe that, the pandemic is over and that disappeared, but no, it's not. I mean, the numbers are not as bad, but they are alarmingly high. They continue to be alarmingly high. And there's been meta-surveys done by the World Health Organization on this. And it's difficult to compare countries and studies, right? But they looked at 113 countries, and it's a global health issue, according to the World Health Organization. And in the comparison in Europe shows that the levels of reported loneliness are the lowest in Northern European countries, where there's more social services, and they're the highest in Eastern Europe and in Asia. Now, I'm not a sociologist to, contextualize and interpret this data. It's just I think it's relevant to acknowledge this. And there's correlations between heart disease, stroke, early death that are related to loneliness, and in younger people to anxiety and depression, which is also an epidemic. What's going on? And I'm thinking about this also in relationship to what our practice is and how it relates to this and what community or sangha is. Now, if I had been surveyed, questioned about feeling lonely, I would have not been counted within the 36%. I would have not said that I am frequently or almost always feeling lonely. And maybe that's true for you too, or maybe for some of you it is different. This is not the point. What interests me is when I study my experience that I find there are moments of loneliness. And I'm interested in their quality or their texture or what is going on in my mind when I do have a mental state that I would call loneliness. So I'm not lonely, and this is an interesting Buddhist perspective. We don't deal with or we're not thinking of the person as a permanent self to which you can attribute the quality of loneliness, like I'm a lonely person. The way I think about things is more like there are moments of experience, and when those moments of experience in their qualities repeat, you experience yourself as a lonely person. But that doesn't mean that, all of us can't have lonely moments. What happens in those moments? This is the question I'm asking. Well, I'll just report about myself. Much of my life, a surprising amount of time happens in front of a screen. It's not something I particularly desire or want to, but it's just the society I live in now. So communicating with people means to be on a screen, writing emails and receiving text messages and responding. And I don't do social media, but being on social media for others. And in my case, doing accounting work and administrative work and organizing things, all that happens on the computer. And there's lots of things in my life that don't happen on the computer. Zazen, chanting, going for a run, practicing Qigong, cooking. I cook quite a bit, for my family. Going on a hike, driving a car. There's a screen in my car now too. Thank you very much. I didn't really want that, but okay. All right, so there I am, just going about my life, and then there's times when I will have spent many hours in front of the screen. Okay. And then there's a time when I start feeling kind of exhausted by it a bit, or exhaustion is not quite the right word. It's a kind of dullness. All right. Now, I know this from experience. The right thing would be to get up and do something that's not in front of the screen. Go for a walk. Go shopping, I don't know, do something different. Get up, prepare a meal or hang out with someone, right? But sometimes, instead of doing that, because this screen is like containing so many possibilities, I'll be I try to stay informed about things. People describe themselves as news junkies, right? It's like, I'm not exactly a news junkie, but I do stay informed. I start clicking around. I'll watch this video clip. I read this newspaper article. And what I find when I do that is I'm not doing this activity directed by wanting to know something in particular. I'm actually being directed by what the screen offers me, and that means in the background some algorithm that presents this and that, and So I'm jumping around in that stuff, and there's something paradoxical happening there. It's like the dullness, when I pay attention to my bodily sensations, the dullness actually increases. But the mind still kind of does the next click or reads the next article or the next paragraph because there's some kind of satisfaction in the mind that for me, again, I'm just reporting about my experience, doesn't translate into a satisfaction in the body. The body becomes kind of increasingly dissatisfied and the mind just keeps going. You know, if you do this late at night to an excess, you really feel depleted afterwards, I assume. And you can do this with like watching an excessive amount of television or, news or watching movies. It doesn't matter, like whatever your preference is. So what is this? Like, what is this? I call it dullness. You may have a different word. What is this, like, bodily felt dullness in relationship to this weird excitement of the mind to just keep going with taking in more information? I find myself, let me coin this as a kind of phrase, I find myself sort of encapsulated in some kind of disembodied information bubble that seeks more information. It doesn't matter what that information is. If you're a workaholic, it may be, you read the next legal document if you're a lawyer. If you are, a business person, it's the next spreadsheet you analyze and compare, and it doesn't matter. It's just the mind satisfies itself in this disembodied information bubble with more information. And it's a lonely place. Now, you know this from sitting Zazen. If you sit Zazen and your discursive mind just goes and goes and goes, that's a lonely place too. And that discursive mind also seeks more information, so to speak, more thought content. It's like, if I do this on the screen, it's like externalized information or thought content, or it's internalized information or thought content that just kind of keeps going. And in both situations, there's a sense of a disembodied dullness. This is a lonely place. Now, on the contrary, let's make an observation that some of us share. If you sit sesshin with people for 7 days, many, many people report at the end of the sesshin that they feel surprisingly connected with the people with whom they just were on this 7-day journey on which not much was done. We sat a bunch, we bowed, we chanted a bit, we made meals, we ate. We didn't talk, hardly. A little functional talking to coordinate the meal preparation and this and that. And even though there was no talking, at the end, people say, well, this is like, I feel so connected with these people. This is like, it's just an experience, right? But if you want to understand, when you ask the question, like, what is going on here? Something that I observe is that there is our society construes connection basically as exchange of information. To be connected with someone means you talk with them. You share your story, you share your interests, you hear what another person has to say about their life. And this is sort of this idea of intimacy that emerges from verbal exchange. But as we know, this verbal exchange is fraught with difficulty. It's like, because when you exchange ideas and stuff, there's always divergence. It's like you may have found your soulmate with whom you share all the same views or something, right? But you just dig a little deeper and there's divergence. But it's interesting, space, if you share space, not words, space is not divergent. Space accommodates everything. Space is always inclusive. So I suspect that when we sit sesshin and we accept that we're in a room with 15 other people or 30, I don't know, it doesn't matter what size. Matters a bit, maybe a little bit, If it gets too big, you don't have a sense of sharing the space anymore. Depends on how the space is organized. If it's a football stadium, you could still feel that you're sharing a space. If it's a parking lot, I don't know. Okay, but that's side thought. Sharing space is inclusive. It makes us converge into like this group of people, and we're all sharing the same space, and we give each other space in that space. We accept that this person is here, and this person is here, and I'm here. This is measurable to a certain degree because nervous systems and physiologies co-regulate each other. I mean, this is clear between mothers and children, for example, but it's happening between people too. It's like, if you're in the presence of a calm person, you're more likely to calm down if you're upset. If you're in the presence of an upset person, you might get upset yourself, not knowing why, just because the upsetness of the other person co-regulates you. Anxiety is infectious. And so is calm, or breathing patterns, or women's periods, for that matter, Like what was studied in college dorms, that women start having their period at the same time. This is mysterious. This is co-regulation on a physiological level. If you spend enough time together sharing space. Now, I don't think that this sharing of space is the only, it's that it's a sufficient condition to form community, but it's an important one. Oops. I think there's something, I have trouble finding words for what I'm feeling here, but I think there's something like also, what's also necessary is to experience having an aligned experiential journey. So, if you're in a sesshin together, that's an experiential journey, and you're kind of aligned in it because, to do sesshin, you kind of have to get with the program. You kind of have to do it. Or else the sesshin spits you out, and then you're... So recently I've talked to feeling out and thinking about community, I talked to our practice council and I said, I think I'd like to start a practice that after morning zazen, we sweep the courtyard together. Now, this is a seemingly insignificant thing to do, but I am suggesting and doing it with you because it's actually, in a small way, an aligned experiential journey. Pick up a broom, have a common objective, sweeping the courtyard. We define how far we go. We go to the backyard too, and we go. Sometimes if we are enough people and there's enough motivation and time, we will go all the way to the front. Sweep the paths in the front yard too, not just the courtyard here. And you do it, don't talk. And it depends on what kind of person you are, maybe, but for me, there's it's not a grand feeling, but there's just a sense of satisfaction to have done something with a small group of people together. You look at the courtyard, it's clean now. We also have these gardening days now on Sunday where, my area was to place these rocks and make this rainwater garden with Marion, and other people have prepared and planted the vegetable garden. We're not done, or we're, weeding and making the garden, the appearance of the garden more beautiful. And there's the same kind of satisfaction. You do something together for 3 hours, and then you sit down and you have a snack and drink tea and feel satisfied about having gone on this journey together. This is, I think, true for trips you take with other people and things like that. Meals you cook together in the kitchen. If the emphasis was on talking with each other, there would be immediately divergence. But in the doing, if we can align ourselves in the doing, there's convergence. There's not that divergence is bad. Doing things together. There's so much talk about polarization in the United States. Right? This all happens on the basis, I think, mostly in comparing viewpoints. Because as a society, we just keep doing things together, and on that level, there's not that much polarization. I sometimes get to, I don't ask, but I think I get to work with people who are of different political persuasion, tradespeople who I hire, and, I just work on projects with them. It's no problem. I suppose I don't share their views. They're not Buddhists. They don't practice Zazen. One can just do things together, and it's not a problem. Because the deeper alignment of actually being in a shared space in which you want to function together and do things well, that is still shared by a lot of people. Most people share that interest. When you start looking at how we think about things, well, divergence immediately. So I think it is actually a mistake to try to define community And this is very common to do through the idea of shared interests or shared views. This is a big mistake. We should more look toward how do we share space and how do we align ourselves in our doing. Now, there's a deeper problem here, which I'm going to try to touch on. Let's see. It's a bit philosophical. I think there is a deep-seated error in our Western worldview. I'm not right. When I say Western, I don't mean that it's better in the East, because I have no idea. I'm saying West because this is what we say when we talk about North America and Europe. I think there's a deep-seated error or delusion even. And some people attribute this to Democritus, who lived in the 5th century before Christ. You may know this. Democritus is credited with having initiated this idea of atomism. That matter is composed of little things, atoms, indivisible things that are creating matter. And this has influenced our scientific worldview a lot. This was just speculative, right? And the important thing here is that what was considered real or the world became, that which is observable, that which is stably observable. In Aristotle, this becomes like substance, the idea of substance, and that substances have attributes, and that substances can be in a relationship to each other. And the scientific worldview, the world of physics, emerges from a world in which only that which can be measured and stably observed by everyone, potentially, but other people, counts as real. Well, what happens to all the things that don't fall into that category? That are not, solid objects that one can see and measure. What happens to bodily sensations and feelings and emotions and atmospheres and multifaceted impressions of things? And what we could call situations. I'm going to define that in a more rigorous way, but let me just say situations. Situational knowledge. What happened to those things? Well, they're not really real anymore. So you need a place for them to live, and that's the soul. So people are bodies. Those are real. Bodies are real things. And then they also have this strange thing, which is sort of like an nobody knows where it is, but it's an internal container in which there are the rubbish of the world, feelings, emotions, impressions, situational knowledge. That's all the rubbish that you dump into the soul and that you call merely subjective. This is, Plato and Socrates, and they made a big point about that. In fact, they take on this division. We could call it so to reduce the world to matter and measurable things, we can call this reductionism. And the creation of the soul that has all the rubbish in it, we can call psychologism. But Plato started to say, like, oh, okay, well, there's all this, like, there are all these dangerous things, like these, emotions. Like, we need someone to be in control. Like, that's rationality. We'll put rationality in control of all these other, dynamics in our soul, and everything gets confused, is because Plato has to be sort of against the body, because he knows, well, these sensations and feelings, that it has something to do with the body, so that needs to be suppressed, and the rational mind needs to be emphasized. But the more scientific-oriented people, they really have to emphasize the body and reality, and they need to get rid of the soul as not reliable. It gets all very confused. And so ensues the Western history of ideas and philosophy, and all kind of based in this initial move of reductionism and psychologism. This tendency to be in charge of yourself through your rational mind also gets projected onto the world, because now we want to be with our rational mind in charge of the objective world and control it, and that's technology emerges from that. Now, the reason this is relevant to my topic of loneliness and community is this soul is a lonely place. Because one of the questions that is basically unanswered to this day is because you're kind of inside this weird container nobody sees, that's where you are with your private rubbish. How did you get out of that and know somebody else's private stuff? Right? You need long conversation. But if it's actually true that you need long conversation to know somebody, then how is it possible that after 7 days of sesshin you can feel intimately connected with 15 people you didn't know before? How is that possible if it's true that we live really inside the soul container where we have a hard time getting to know someone else? How is it then possible? Because it's wrong. That's a wrong view of the world. This is not how things are. It's that simple. But we have been stuck in this worldview for 2,500 years. So I'll tell you a little story. We had a visitor, another Zen teacher. Josh was there, Gary was there, and he came and basically said hello. I had met him before once at a conference, and he was doing something in Colorado, so he came by. Doesn't matter who he is. But I don't know him as a person, really. Okay, so it was the three of us, and we were talking with him. Tea, cookies, conversation. And we, after he left, the three of us shared our impression of him as a person. What impression he left on us. And I was actually I remember the moment very clearly, both Josh and Gary sort of waiting what I said. I took a long pause, and I was searching for a word that would kind of capture the essence of my impression of this person we had just met. And it was hard to do. I forget what word I found, and I used one, and then said, that's not quite right. Maybe another word, try that out. But I was kind of in the territory, I noticed. I was kind of in the territory of communicating my impression. Now, the point that I want to make is, the impression was real. The trying to express it was not unimportant, but somewhat secondary to the vividness of the impression of how this person had affected me. Now, the way this person affected me as a multifaceted impression that was hard to put in words is the basis for my relationship with him. It's not some subjective rubbish that is unimportant and it's better to measure his physiology. It's the real thing that determines how I will be in relationship with him. And this is true for all of us. Constantly. In fact, the advantage that other people have over us is that they have an impression of us as a whole person, and we don't have it for ourselves. So technically, I would call this a situation. A situation is a multifaceted, we could say it's a multiplicity of aspects that are not clearly separated from each other. It's a multiplicity of undivided aspects that nonetheless come to me as a whole. And you can have this situational awareness of any situation, of like your workplace, your relationship with person X, this problem that you're dealing with. There's always a multiplicity of undivided aspects that constitute the whole of this problem, or the whole of this relationship, or the whole of this facial expression. And then, verbally, intellectually, conceptually, whatever word you want to put there, you can tease out the aspects. And in order to have any accuracy there, you need to always go back to this holistic felt sense of the whole situation, which has left an impression on you. And it's changing too. It's not static. This is, the craft of being alive completely depends on this situational knowledge and the taking in of impressions of holistic multiplicities. And it's disregarded in our worldview. Or do you hear people talk about it? Artists talk about it. The other day I heard an episode about editing. Yeah, somebody talked about it there because in order to edit something, you need to stay true to the impression that you have of a text. The holistic impression of the multifaceted presence of this text and what it does with you, and then you can interact with it and make it better or more concise or say more what it really tries to say, and take out this part that goes off to on a side track that is not so important. So a good editor will have to do that, or else they fail the author. So what does this have to do with community? It's because we exist in shared, or maybe we could say common situations. When we share space and are on a journey of a line journey of doing together, we create common situations in which. So now, if that is a repeated activity, right? We intimately and instantaneously know the shared common situation. We start to know, everyone who participates starts to know it, yes, from their particular personal angle, but you start caring about it together. Now, our caring may have different interests. So the good thing about situations is that they can contain contradictions. It's no problem. Certain aspects within a situation contradict each other. They still belong. If we defined ourselves as more as belonging to shared or common situations, we would just tolerate that there are contradictory aspects in every situation, and then one person pulls out this aspect, another person pulls out that aspect. But it belongs. Conflict belongs too, because sometimes that has to be, it has to be articulated in contrast and in contradiction to work something out. This is not, if you define community as shared interest or similar viewpoints or something, you are missing the deeper connection of the common situation to which the contradictory viewpoints actually belong. So one of the things that I think is really problematic in our society, that we are defining ourselves as individuals, which means we're these separate soul containers, having a hard time reaching out and getting in touch with these other soul containers. So we demand that, I have certain interests. I want them to be serviced. I have certain rights. I want them to be granted. It's like, that is about me. These are my freedoms. I think what our liberal, freedom-loving societies have lost is the embeddedness in common situations. We disregard that. We're still embedded, as I pointed out, but we disregard it to a certain degree because we make it more important what our journey is, my journey, not the aligned journey that I'm on with others. I am not sitting here pretending that I have mastered this, because this is, in my view, a 2,500-year-old heritage that we are the victims of. But it's our responsibility to see it and to maybe correct it. So rather than, who am I and how can I control the situation, it's like, what do I, stepping back from who you think you are, what is the common situation, and what does the common situation ask of me to be and become? And also not with permanency, but situationally. So I think it's very ill-conceived, this idea is like, I can be whoever I want to be. I'll decide who I want to be. Well, it doesn't matter whether it's profession or gender. That it is in your control who you want to be. Who you are emerges from a common situation in this view that I'm presenting. Now, this is somewhat dangerous, because who wants to go back to being defined by family and village and tribe, aren't these the stuffy situations that we want to escape? I certainly did. But there's a high price to pay. And this is maybe the historical moment we're in. There's a high price to pay. We end up being uprooted. It's like if you imagine a plant can't walk away. We're not plants, but let's imagine we're plants. You can't walk away. This is where you were planted. Now you have to make it work. I'm not thinking in black and white like, oh, we should be like a plant. I'm just saying, like, if we notice that we are walking away all the time to pursue our own ideas, when we define ourselves of living inside here with, and having a feeling like we can't even really connect with people, this is the price, is loneliness, uprootedness, not belonging anywhere. Because for common situations to evolve, you need to stay in them. You know this from cultivating friendship. So, in Zen practice, in my view, if you look at the forms are doing these very basic things, and sometimes it's like, I'm explicating this now, sometimes it's really hard to see what it is about. It's about sharing space. It's about doing things together. It's about recognizing a common situation that we are embedded in. It's about letting that common situation situationally define what you are and become for this moment in this interaction, for this task. The readiness to let the 10,000 things come forward and actualize the self, as Dogen says it. There's a worldview embedded in this simple phrase that I now have explicated in a very wordy way, and also the contrasting worldview that we are stuck in the West, and why I think a practice like Zen Buddhism becomes interesting to us, because it's an antidote. We don't fully understand it. I don't know. I couldn't have said any of what I've said when I started practicing. It takes a lot of observing. And last thing I say, and about the forms, the way we know the world and the way we know other people is through what I would call embodiment or mutual embodiment. So again, I've already said, it's like this worldview isn't about knowing things through verbalizing and conceptualizing. It is knowing things through holistic impressions that manifest as what I call felt sense. And the way that's done is to the way I use the word embodiment here, it can be used differently, is sort of to feel something within your own felt body. It's a kind of aesthetic relationship. It's like to look at the thing and let it make an impression on you, to look at a person and let the person make an impression on you without thinking about it. To let a situation make an impression on you, not with thinking about it, but feeling the nuance of what is all part of the room, the space, the situation, the interactive field. Just let it make an impression. You don't have to do anything about that. But that impression that will result in a quite subtle, vague, felt sense will direct your action, will direct your next gesture, will direct what you say. And that emerges, you don't know what that is. You're not in control. Mm-hmm. This is what we don't like. You want to preconceive who you are and what you're going to do to be in control, because otherwise you're at the mercy of the situation. But to let your personal situation emerge from a common situation is, I think, a way to start feeling effortlessly connected. You're already connected. You don't have to do something special to be connected. Whereas when we're in this conceptual, verbal paradigm of connection, we always have to do a lot. Thank you. I hope I said something meaningful. It feels complicated, but it's not. I hope you feel that it, we don't have to master anything. It's just do you feel that this has pointed you to a certain kind of territory of the way the world can also be seen or perceived or be in connection to? Thank you.